Hello, I'm Nacho. Today, I'm here to guide you through the plot of a gripping sci-fi movie called Last Sentinel. Just a quick heads up, there are spoilers ahead, so proceed with caution. The story is set in a dark, post-apocalyptic future where unchecked human greed has led to environmental catastrophe. Due to the relentless exploitation of resources, sea levels have risen drastically, submerging most of the planet. It's the year 2063, and only 2 continents remain. These 2 surviving landmasses are fiercely locked in a battle over the last pieces of habitable land and dwindling resources. In the vast ocean that separates these continents, there is a remote military outpost known as the Sentinel. This outpost is manned by 4 soldiers from one of the continents. The team is led by Sergeant Hendricks, a tough no-nonsense leader, with Corporal Cassidy, who is quick-thinking and skilled, Private Baines, an expert with machinery, and Private Sullivan, known for his courage and impulsiveness. Their critical mission is to guard a nuclear bomb stored at the outpost, their continent's key strategic advantage in this intense conflict. However, their 2-year assignment ended 3 months ago and no replacement crew has arrived yet. The long delay leaves them feeling increasingly frustrated and anxious as their food supplies run dangerously low and no help appears to be coming. One dark and stormy night, Cassidy and Sullivan decide to try their luck fishing, hoping to supplement their shrinking food supplies. They manage to catch a good amount, which briefly boosts morale. However, the relief is short-lived. Soon, Sergeant Hendricks notices a massive and violent storm rapidly approaching their location. Sensing the imminent threat, he urgently instructs Baines to secure the nuclear bomb immediately to prevent any potential disaster from occurring. Then, the waves become big and violent, affecting the outpost's pipelines. Baines rushes to fix them and gets his hands stuck between 2 pipes in the process. Fortunately, after a bit of a struggle, he is able to free himself. On the deck, the waves take the fishing net away, along with the valuable fish. The soldiers barely manage to get inside before an enormous wave hits the structure. This causes it to shake and pushes water through every entrance, but the Sentinel is still standing when the storm is over. The next morning during breakfast, the group discusses how to lower the consumption of their resources. Baines wonders why they don't use the telecommunication device and asks for the relief crew to hurry, but Hendricks shuts down the suggestion quickly. The only communication device between the mainland and the Sentinel is a telegraph which sends messages over Morse code. The sergeant tells them that it should only be used to send daily reports back to base command. He then asks them to concentrate on the repairs instead. Afterwards, Sullivan makes the daily report using the telegraph. As per the sergeant's orders, only the threat of an enemy attack is to be considered worth reporting. However, Sullivan informs the base that there have been no events on the Sentinel. The reply message says that there are no events on the base either. Sullivan jots this down in an official journal, which shows there have been no events on either side for the last few months. Sometime later he joins Hendricks on deck for lookout duty. He takes a pair of binoculars and scans the surrounding waters unenthusiastically. To his surprise, he discovers a ship is approaching the outpost. Cassidy, who is in the command center, also confirms it after checking the radar. This worries the sergeant as he fears it might be the enemy. Therefore, he hands Sullivan a gun and tells him to take a small boat to the ship. He is to sneak in and report if there are any enemies on board. Although the mission is a dangerous one, Sullivan immediately takes off and approaches the ship. He calls out for any possible passengers when he is close enough, but there's no answer, which forces him to board the vessel and begin investigating. Just as he makes his way inside, his radio begins screeching loudly due to static signals. Sullivan turns it off so as not to alert the possible enemy inside. However, as he searches the ship, he realizes that something is up. Objects are covered with dirt, the radio isn't working, and there's untouched food in the cabinets. Meanwhile, Hendricks tries to contact him for a status update, but Sullivan does not answer back, as his radio is switched off. Back at the ship, the private finds 4 life jackets that were meant for the Sentinel's crew. This makes him realize that the ship was meant to be carrying their relief crew, but something strange happens to them, and they disappeared. This means that Sullivan and the 3 others have missed their chance to go home. On the other hand, a restless Hendricks starts assuming that the private has been attacked. So, he wants to detonate the nuclear bomb before the enemy approaches the Sentinel. He then asks Cassidy for one of the launch keys to the explosive. She hesitates, but the sergeant reminds her that this is the protocol they must follow. After she hands him the key, Hendricks combines it with his own and starts activating the explosive. But, right before he enters the launch code, he tries contacting Sullivan one last time. Thankfully, the private has switched his radio back again and answers. A relieved Cassidy watches on as the sergeant cancels the nuclear protocol. However, when she asks for her key back, he says that he's keeping both. He's actually punishing her for the hesitation in following orders. Afterwards, Sullivan tows the ship over to the Sentinel. The private wants to send a message to the base about this ship, but Hendricks forbids it until they get more information. This enrages the crew, and it's obvious that they're starting to get tired of Hendricks' attitude, especially when he has both keys now. After a quick shower, the sergeant checks the ship's navigation history and writes down all the coordinates. He then applies them on a map to follow the path that the ship may have taken. Meanwhile, Sullivan admits to Cassidy and Baines that he sent a message to the base behind Hendricks' back. They will have an answer during the routine communication tomorrow. The next morning, Hendricks finds all of his 3 subordinates suspiciously waiting next to the telegraph. Since the truth is bound to come out sooner or later, Baines confesses everything. This enrages the sergeant, but before he can take action, the telegraph receives an answer. It's actually the same exact message that Sullivan sent last night. Now it is clear to everyone that they lost contact with the base a long time ago. The telegraph has just been repeating the no events message that Sullivan sends every day. But despite this troubling revelation, Hendricks orders all of them to get back to their duties. One night, Sullivan catches Baines coming back from the ship. The two then sit down to have a conversation over drinks. Baines admits that he has been sneaking inside the ship and is certain that he can fix it. Excited by the hope of escape, Sullivan rushes to give Cassidy the news and asks her to leave with them, but she doesn't believe him and is hesitant to work behind the sergeant's back. The next day, Sullivan sneaks into the ship with Baines to help him fix the engine. After hours of work, they finally manage to get it started. They then happily come out of the ship, only to find Hendricks waiting for them. He initially scolds them for defying his orders and wasting time on something that is not part of the mission. He then orders them to take down the ship so that they can use its parts to fix the Sentinel. Hendricks asserts that he won't let them leave because staying here is their duty, regardless if their tenure has ended or not. He even goes as far as threatening to shoot them if they don't get back to work. The guys are worried by the turn of events and fear that Hendricks has gone insane lately. Therefore, Cassidy volunteers to talk to him in private. Later that day, he tells the sergeant that she understands how he feels. It is revealed that Hendricks lost his previous squad to mutiny, but she convinces him to let the 2 men go back to the base and relay information to the Sentinel. In the next scene, Hendricks calls for an urgent meeting. He explains that Cassidy has presented a good argument. Since they don't have communications, someone should report to the base. He suggests that 2 people get to stay and 2 others should go. Hendricks is obviously staying, and Cassidy has volunteered to remain here as well. Upon hearing this, Baines is over the moon, but Sullivan is heartbroken. As it turns out, he's in love with Cassidy. That night, as Hendricks is working on the map, he makes a shocking discovery. The relief ship was headed straight towards them, but a few miles out they began to steer away from the Sentinel on purpose. Eventually they stopped far away from where they were supposed to be, and the crew simply disappeared. Hendricks gets suspicious, as Cassidy was in charge of directing the relief ship to them. The next morning the team awakens to a blaring alarm as another ship has appeared on the radar. This prompts the men to rush to their positions to defend the Sentinel. Cassidy tries to get in contact with the mysterious ship, but to no avail. This time, Hendricks refuses to send anyone and orders the team to shoot down the ship. While they're loading the cannon, Cassidy notices that the ship they caught earlier is missing. Shortly after, Sullivan and Baines refuse to shoot because the ship seems to be moving away from them. There is heavy fog around the Sentinel, and they cannot clearly see the vessel. Cassidy finally realizes that it is their own ship and goes to warn them, but it's too late as Hendricks has already pointed his gun at Baines. It is then revealed that it was the sergeant who let the ship go last night because he didn't want anyone to leave. Despite the revelation, Baines still refuses to destroy the ship, and Hendricks retaliates by shooting his ear. This forces Sullivan to take control of the cannon and fire it at the ship. Seeing it being blown to pieces, a furious Baines tries to go after the sergeant, but Cassidy knocks him out first with a fire extinguisher. They then lock Hendricks up in the pantry, and she takes back both keys. In the aftermath, Baines begins to slip into depression, as their only chance of going back home is now lost. He refuses to return to his duty and begins drinking heavily. On the other hand, Sullivan tells Cassidy that they have no choice but to go through every single channel on the telegraph until they find the one that is working. Later in the afternoon, Sullivan takes some food to the sergeant and wonders why he's changed his mind about leaving. Hendricks shares that the relief ship was here 3 months ago like it was supposed to be, but something made it move away, meaning there's a traitor among them that wants the nuclear bomb. Hearing this, Sullivan is shocked, and he refuses to believe that one of his friends might be a traitor. He then leaves, locking the pantry's door. Despite Hendricks Hendrix pleading to be let out. Following this, Sullivan spends the rest of his day sending SOS messages to every channel. Later in the evening, Cassidy shows him a picture of her as a kid with her family. The photo is from a rainy day where she has the biggest umbrella despite being the smallest child. She tearfully explains that her family was killed by the enemy when she was away at school. The next morning, a drunk and extremely emotional Baines finds Cassidy sleeping alone in the comms room. He attacks her, making it seem as if he wants to take advantage of her, but at an opportune moment he steals the nuclear launch keys and runs away. Baines then goes to the communication room and announces through the speakers that he'll activate the explosive. This scares the other two and they try their best to calm him down. They talk about his family, who are desperately anticipating his return home. The duo also assures him that all of them will make it out of this alive. Upon hearing this, Baines breaks down in tears and finally steps away from the controls, allowing Cassidy to take back both the keys. After the nerves settle, Sullivan thinks it's time to let Hendrix out, but Baines has shocking news. He reveals that he tried to enter the pantry earlier and found Hendrix missing. An open window indicated he had ended things for himself. When Cassidy and Sullivan check the pantry, they're devastated to learn that their sergeant is actually gone. A few days pass, and the crew begins to move on with their duties. Baines is also doing well, and he spends most of his time working on the Sentinel's repair. One afternoon, Baines and Cassidy decide to go check the debris of the ship so that they can salvage necessary stuff. Sullivan gives her a gun just in case, and Cassidy thanks him with a kiss. They may give nukes to the enemy, but at least his ego's getting stroked, and maybe, just maybe, something else. Moments later, Sullivan decides to try fishing again from the lower deck, but when he pulls up the net, he discovers Hendrix's body with a bullet wound on his head. This means that someone killed him, and there truly is a traitor among them. While he runs to check on his friends' profiles for clues, Cassidy stares at Baines in the boat, putting together a malicious plan. Shortly after, a storm begins brewing, and Sullivan checks the beacon outside. He confirms it can be taken off and moved around. It is then revealed through a flashback that it was Cassidy who took the beacon away in a boat. She made the relief ship follow her instead of going to the Sentinel, and when they reached a safe distance away, she killed the team and let the ship float away. Back in the present, only Cassidy comes back from the little trip. She says that Baines accidentally fell and died while trying to grab some plastic. Sullivan immediately guesses she killed him and that she was the traitor all along. However, he's too scared to say anything yet, and the duo ends up sleeping together. Scared, yeah. The next morning, Cassidy wakes up to find herself alone in bed. Suddenly, Sullivan talks to her through the walkie-talkie, explaining that he knows she killed everyone. He also accuses her of spying for the enemy and promises he won't let her have the bomb. Also, was it good for you? Cassidy then realizes she's missing the keys and runs to the comms room. There she finds Sullivan in the middle of activating the explosive. Since they have no future, he doesn't mind blowing up the Sentinel with them still inside. Doesn't matter how it's. Cassidy tries to explain that people in her homeland are suffering and she hated lying to him, but the private doesn't believe her and activates the explosive. However, instead of exploding, the machine displays a funny little phrase that Baines liked to repeat. This makes them realize that Baines had reprogrammed the bomb, so nobody could use it for destruction. In the final scene, Sullivan and Cassidy have a little talk. They agree that no matter what side of the war comes, they'll protect the Sentinel together and keep on surviving. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.